I'm thrilled to invite my friend and colleague, Brooke Goldstein, the founder and executive director of Lawfare project. Brooke has been at the forefront of the legal battle to give Jews the same protections against persecution that any other minority faces. The Lawfare project provides pro bono legal services to protect the civil and human rights of the Jewish people worldwide. Most recently, Brooke has been a founder of a grassroots movement, End Jew Hatred, that is empowering the Jewish communities to come together and rally against anti-Semitism. It's my pleasure and my honor to welcome Brooke tonight.
Thank you, Masha. It is an honor to have been asked to address Club Z and your audience today. I am so proud of the work that we've done together. And I think that Club Z is one of the most important organizations that exists today when it comes to training Jewish youth in a Zionist education that's rooted in Jewish pride and in a civil rights narrative. I think that right now, anyone who is watching the news will agree that we have an opportunity because we are witnessing the rise of minority rights movements in the West that are creating seismic shifts and changes in the way that the public deals with minority communities, whether it's Black Lives Matter or the New Women's Movement or the gay rights movement. It is undeniable that these movements, using 21st century social mobilization and organization techniques rooted in civil rights advocacy, are creating massive change, whether you agree with them or not. And yet, Jews and the Jewish community still have not mobilized themselves to achieve this type of effective change. And the question is why? I believe it's because we have rooted our advocacy not around a civil rights narrative, but we've primarily centered it around what we call a pro-Israel narrative. Now, pro-Israel narratives are extremely important. Fostering a dialogue and winning the so-called debate about the conflict that's happening in the Middle East that is an existential threat to the Jewish state is absolutely essential. But it has handicapped us here in the United States if the goal is to ensure that we live here free from discrimination in this country and in the diaspora. So the question is why? Why has the pro-Israel narrative until now not resonated as a civil rights narrative on campus to the extent that it has shifted the anti-Jewish discrimination to become less? Why are we seeing it become more? I think there are 3 or 4 answers to this question, depends on how you group it. The first is that a pro-Israel narrative, by definition, creates a binary, a pro and an anti. And if we described ourselves as pro-Israel, then what we are admitting is that there is another camp, which is apparently legitimate, which is anti-Israel, and that any objective person coming into the space has to consider both sides and to make a conclusion. I think this is a strategic mistake. The second way that this has handicapped us is because it has created a narrative that's centered on rebuking and defending against false accusations. It has created a defensive posture for us, which is a weak posture, and it necessitates us repeating the allegations of our enemy, training our Jewish youth to defend against accusations of apartheid, repeating that terminology, that false terminology, defend against accusations of illegal occupation, defending against something called BDS, repeating an acronym that I guarantee if you go to any town USA and you poll 100 people and you ask them, what is BDS? Are you for it or against it? They wouldn't know what you're talking about. They would have to look up what the acronym means, and then they would go and have to research, what they're for and what they're against, and what the BDS claims are and so forth. Instead, if we framed our opposition against this bigotry as that which is against discrimination based on race, ethnicity, national origin, and religion, I guarantee you that people would be for it. If you ask, are you for or against BDS? They would have to do the research that I just mentioned. But if you polled 100 people and said, are you for businesses not doing, or a restaurant or a store not doing business with somebody because of the color of their skin, or because of where they were born, or because of their religion? Most people would say, absolutely, I'm against that. And we have failed to phrase the anti-BDS narrative as a civil rights issue. We have failed to phrase the BDS movement as one that aims to violate the basic civil rights of Jews due to our protected ethnic, cultural, religious, and national origin categories under law. I'll give you an example. When the Lawfare Project sued the National Lawyers Guild, the oldest lawyers guild in America, for enforcing a so-called BDS resolution, in the end, we forced the guild to adopt a resolution declaring that it prohibits its members from discriminating based on national origin and other protected categories. The third reason that the narrative, the so-called pro-Israel narrative, has handicapped us is because it has legitimated the excuse, I'm not anti-Jewish, I'm just anti-Zionist, and I'm engaging in a political debate. So what do I mean by this? When the Lawfare Project sued San Francisco State University, SFSU did not dispute the fact that it allowed Jewish students to be left out of the Know Your Right fair, to not have been included in a Know Your Rights fair. It did not dispute the fact that a Jewish event was shut down. It said, oh yeah, well, we admit these facts, but the Jewish students weren't discriminated against because their religion. We didn't discriminate against them because they're Jewish. We discriminated against them because they are Zionists. And Zionism is a political point of view. It's not a protected category, and therefore we're not in violation of California's anti-discrimination law. If we respond to anti-Jewish discrimination by arguing Middle Eastern politics, we legitimate that response. If we respond to a Jewish student being spat on and called a dirty Zionist pig, which is what's happened to our client at Columbia University, if we respond to Jewish students being excluded from events by debating Middle Eastern politics, we are giving credence to that narrative. Just like it is racist to have a problem with the Chinese government's handling of COVID and then turn around to a Chinese American student and discriminate against them, blame them for the crimes of a foreign country. Just like it's racist if you have a problem with Iranian nuclear disarmament or the lack of Iranian nuclear disarmament, you don't turn around to the local Muslim American student and discriminate against them. That's bigotry. But we have allowed people to discriminate against Jewish students, offering and imposing on them a political litmus test because they're Jewish, because we have then trained them to respond to this discrimination by debating a foreign conflict. And finally, what we have lacked to date, up until Club Z, frankly, is to provide a method for our youth to engage in the way that civil rights activists engage in the 21st century by doing things like so-called virtue signaling online. Posting a pro-Israel post, 10 reasons why Israel is not an occupying state, is simply not the same thing as going to a Breonna Taylor rally and posting a selfie with your fist in the air. We have failed to give them this type of advocacy that resonates in the 21st century. And that has led to a huge void which has allowed our Jewish youth to be swept up in these other social movements like Black Lives Matter, like the New Women's Movement, where they are marching behind people like Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory, and they're being told by so-called progressive Jewish outfits that in order to stay relevant, they have to ignore the Jew hatred in these movements and march behind them, otherwise we're going to cede the space. This doesn't inspire pride and respect. It breeds contempt. And that is why Club Z is so important, because it recenters what it means to be a Jewish advocate on advocating for yourself as a proud Jew, as a proud minority community in this country, deserving of equal protection under the law. It advocates against the systemic Jew hatred in Western and Eastern culture. It advocates for Jewish liberation in the advocacy space. It advocates for redemption of the academic space. It advocates against the colonization of the term Zionism. It advocates against the appropriation of Jewish pain, advocates against denying the uniqueness of our communal history and the uniqueness of Jewish pain and inherited trauma. It creates safe spaces for Jewish students to discuss the pain and the trauma they feel, with the goal of empowering them using civil rights terminology. And it heals this pain by really training our Jewish students in emancipatory civil rights training that's aimed, again, at empowering them to be advocates, not to send them into the campus with a shield instead of a sword. And so that is why I'm so, so proud to have partnered with Club Z, both in the End Jew Hatred movement and many other instances. Number one, because they are a leader when it comes to advocating against lumping anti-Semitism together with so-called anti-racism training, which again denies the uniqueness of our historical pain and the uniqueness of what is anti-Semitism in terms of a form of bigotry. They have gone on the offense with their Bill of Rights. They are reshaping what Jewish advocacy is on campuses by going on the offense and proposing using civil rights terminology that resonates through their Bill of Rights, which I encourage everyone to read online and to ensure that every single school that they are involved with adopts this Bill of Rights. Club Z ensures that not only are Jews connected to their heritage and the Jewish state, but also that Jewish youth are prepared to pick up the mantle and effectively advocate for themselves as a minority community, whether it's on campus or later in the workplace or even in social media. I had the opportunity to meet Jennifer Carlin, who you're going to see later on a teen panel, because she literally was the star of the show when Lawfare and End Jew Hatred and Club Z and all of our partners came together to stage a protest, a groundbreaking protest against Jew hatred at USC, at the University of Southern California. Jennifer Carlin took the stage, and because of the training that she received at Club Z, she was one of the most powerful speakers and has since then gone on to now shape her social media presence and continue to speak out for the Jewish people and against Jew hatred. Because when you watch and when you listen to Club Z teens, you can't help but feel the utmost respect, the pride, the courage, and the dignity that they display leads me to have the utmost respect for the work that Masha and Naya and their team do and all the efforts that Club Z is making for our community. I'll leave you with this. Club Z is not a letter writing organization. It is an action organization. And I urge you to support it and to send your teens to Club Z. Thank you so much.